confrontation erupts at Reagan National Airport when two officers roughly handcuff a middle-aged black woman retrieving her luggage. They mock her calm requests for explanation, assuming she's just another troublemaker they can intimidate. What they don't know? She's FBI Director Elaine Richardson, returning from an international security conference. And in the next 5 minutes, their 20-year careers will implode as airport cameras record everything. This is a story of prejudice, power, and the kind of justice that doesn't whisper. It roars. Stick around for the twist. You won't believe it until you see it. Let us know where you're watching from and what time you found this. We read every comment. Washington, D.C. had always been a city of masks. Marble monuments gleaming against a backdrop of backroom deals and whispered secrets. Power here wasn't just political. It was cultural, economic, personal. The September sun blazed through the glass walls of Reagan National Airport's Terminal C as passengers streamed toward baggage claim. Director Elaine Richardson moved with practiced efficiency through the crowd. At 58, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had earned every step of her ascent. Her cropped, silver-streaked hair framed a face that revealed nothing while observing everything. 26 years at the Bureau had taught her that perception was both weapon and shield. People rarely noticed her unless she wanted them to. LaGuardia Airport, with its constant motion and security theater, was just another field operation to her trained eye. Elaine had joined the FBI as a field agent when female agents were still novelties, then methodically risen through counterterrorism, cybercrime, and finally to the director's chair, the first black woman to hold the position in the Bureau's history. Some in Washington still hadn't adjusted to that reality. Elaine knew the whispers behind closed doors, the suggestions that her appointment was political rather than earned. She'd weathered them like everything else, with quiet competence that eventually silenced most critics. As she approached baggage claim, Elaine noticed Officers Rayburn and Delaney before they noticed her. Airport police, mid-40s, with the casual swagger of men who wore authority like it was their birthright. Rayburn, barrel-chested with a military buzz cut, scanned the crowd with practiced suspicion. Delaney, leaner but no less intense, fidgeted with his radio as they positioned themselves near the carousel. Elaine felt her jaw tighten imperceptibly. She knew men like these, had investigated too many of them across her career. Men who confused power with righteousness, who saw threats in skin colors different from their own. She moved toward the carousel quietly, mentally already preparing for her afternoon briefing at headquarters. Her overnight bag contained classified documents from the Interpol conference. Nothing that couldn't wait, but important nonetheless. As the luggage began circling, Elaine positioned herself strategically, noting how Rayburn's gaze swept past her, then returned with narrowed eyes. The young man beside her, no older than 20, wore headphones and a university sweatshirt. His hands trembled slightly as he checked his phone, glancing nervously at the officers. "ID check," Rayburn barked suddenly, pointing at the young man beside Elaine. "Now." Elaine continued watching the carousel, her black roller bag appearing around the bend. "Ma'am, I said ID check," Rayburn repeated louder, now looking directly at Elaine. Elaine turned calmly. "I believe you were addressing this gentleman." Rayburn's eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across his face as he tried to place her. Civilian administrator? Airline staff? She wasn't in uniform, so to him, she wasn't important. "You got ID too?" he demanded, stepping closer. "Both of you." Elaine didn't answer immediately, reaching instead for her bag as it passed. Rayburn moved suddenly, blocking her. "I'm talking to you," he said, voice hard with authority. The terminal had grown quieter, other passengers slowing, watching the scene unfold. Delaney approached from behind, hand resting on his belt. "Don't touch that bag," Rayburn snapped. And then it happened. A rough hand clamped down on Elaine's wrist, yanking her away from the carousel. The fluorescent lights overhead caught the motion, casting harsh shadows across faces suddenly frozen in shock. Elaine didn't resist the hold, didn't pull away. Slowly, she turned her head, meeting Rayburn's hostile gaze with calm, measured assessment. Rayburn tightened his grip, almost surprised by his own action, but unwilling to back down. "When an officer gives you an order, you follow it," he muttered. Someone nearby whispered, "Is this necessary?" Another voice, "She wasn't doing anything." But Elaine's focus never wavered from Rayburn's face, cataloging every detail of his expression, his posture, his badge number. He remained oblivious to the trap he'd set for himself. "I don't know what you think you're doing," Rayburn continued, "but this is a security zone. You'll comply, or—" Elaine stepped forward, just once. The silence in the terminal tightened like a noose. A woman nearby murmured, "That's not just any passenger." But Rayburn wasn't listening, his free hand already reaching for handcuffs. "I'll ask you once more," Elaine said calmly, her voice carrying with surprising authority. "Remove your hand from my person, Officer Rayburn." The color drained from Delaney's face. A passing TSA agent stopped cold. Rayburn blinked. "How do you know my—" Elaine straightened to her full height. "Release me now." Rayburn stood like a statue, eyes locked on this woman who somehow knew his name, who showed no fear, whose presence suddenly seemed to fill the terminal. He blinked twice. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. Elaine clasped her hands in front of her, letting the silence build weight. Even Delaney looked like he was holding his breath. One moment can change everything. What would you do if the room turned against you, without warning? Share your reaction below. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. "Officer Rayburn," Elaine finally said, voice clear enough to carry to the gathering crowd, "are you detaining the federal director of the FBI without cause in a public airport?" I didn't know who you were," he stammered. "That is not what—" I asked. "Yes or no?" Several passengers had already pulled out phones. Cameras were rolling, capturing every second of the confrontation. "You weren't showing identification. I thought—" "You thought I was beneath your notice," Elaine said evenly. "You're making this into something it's not." "I'm not making this into anything. You physically restrained a federal official without provocation or reasonable suspicion." Rayburn glanced at Delaney for support, but his partner had taken a step back. No one met his eye. "If I were a white male passenger, would you have grabbed my wrist like that?" Elaine asked quietly. Rayburn said nothing. His silence hung in the air like a confession. "I'll take that as a no," Elaine continued. "Now you've compounded assault with obstruction." "I was following protocol," Rayburn snapped. "That bag," he pointed toward her luggage, "was unattended." "Enough," Elaine cut him off. "You do not get to fabricate justifications for racial profiling. If someone crossed a line they couldn't take back, would you call them out? Or let the world decide? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too." She turned to Delaney, her tone crisp. "Officer Delaney, please contact your supervisor immediately and inform them that Officers Rayburn and Delaney have physically detained the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation without cause at baggage claim." Rayburn took a step back, suddenly understanding that the ground beneath him was shifting. This wasn't going to disappear with a half-hearted apology or departmental wrist slap. No union rep would make this go away. Elaine glanced around the terminal. "Is this area under video surveillance?" "Yes, ma'am," Delaney replied instantly, his voice tight. "Full coverage." "Good. Then the record will reflect visual evidence of this encounter." Rayburn's eyes darted toward the ceiling corners where security cameras blinked silently. His expression transformed from confidence to naked fear. "Listen, I didn't mean—" he began again. Elaine raised a single hand and stopped him mid-sentence. "You've had years of not meaning it," she said. "I've reviewed airport police complaints during my previous role in internal affairs. I've seen the pattern of selective enforcement. But here's what's different today, officer. This happened to someone with the authority to ensure consequences." He opened his mouth again. "I have spent my career watching officers mistake intimidation for security, bias for instinct, and compliance for justice. Not today." She stood taller, the entire terminal seeming to straighten with her. "As director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, when the tide starts turning, do you stand firmer or back down? What would you do if power shifted your way? Let us know. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. I am formally requesting an immediate investigation into civil rights violations by Officers Rayburn and Delaney of the Airport Authority Police." The crowd that had gathered collectively inhaled. Elaine turned to an approaching security supervisor who had finally noticed the commotion. "I need these officers removed from active duty, effective immediately. Do not confiscate their badges, yet. They are still sworn officers and deserve professional treatment. But they are not to continue patrol." Rayburn's jaw dropped open. "This is completely disproportionate," he protested, voice rising with panic. "I was just doing my job. I had no idea who—" "And yet," Elaine said quietly, eyes unwavering, "you knew enough to target me." Rayburn looked around wildly, but the IDT crowd had formed a loose circle, their phones recording, their faces showing no sympathy. No allies, no defense, just the consequences of his own actions closing in. The sound of radios crackling to life seemed to echo through the terminal as more security personnel approached. The supervisor stood awkwardly between Elaine and Rayburn, hand resting on his radio, not threatening but clearly ready to act. Rayburn stood rigid, face flushed red, jaw clenched tightly, as if physically restraining himself from further outburst. Elaine remained perfectly still, her gaze fixed on him, offering no escape route, no easy path to dismiss what had happened. "Director Richardson," came a voice from behind her. It was an airport operations manager, a woman in her 40s with a clipboard and an expression of controlled panic. "Can we assist you with anything? Perhaps continue this in a private office?" Elaine turned her gaze slowly toward her. "I will address that shortly. But first, I want to be clear about what happened here, because this is no longer just about airport security. It's about accountability and public trust." She looked toward the recording phones. "You all witnessed two officers physically detain a passenger based on appearance, escalate without provocation, and attempt to intimidate rather than protect. Record it. Remember it. Because when law enforcement chooses targets rather than threats, we are no longer secure. We are subjugated." The terminal fell silent. Even the airport announcements seemed to pause. Rayburn scoffed suddenly. "You're really going to turn this into some kind of political moment?" Elaine slowly turned back to him. "Is that what you think this is, officer? Public accountability? A moment?" He said nothing as she stepped closer, her voice dropping so only those nearest could hear, though the nearby phones captured every word. You've been protected for a long time, haven't you? I recognize the pattern. Officers who walk into spaces assuming authority without responsibility, who say, "I didn't know," when they mean, "I didn't care." Rayburn's eyes flicked nervously toward his partner. "Let me explain what happens next," Elaine continued. "The FBI's Civil Rights Division will receive my formal complaint within the hour. The footage from security cameras and these passengers' phones will be reviewed. Your departmental history will be thoroughly examined. And the press, they already have enough for tonight's news." "You're destroying my career over a misunderstanding," Rayburn said hoarsely. "No, officer," Elaine replied. "You compromised your oath the moment you decided I fit a profile rather than posed a threat." He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the young man he'd originally approached. The student was watching now, not fearfully, but with something Rayburn couldn't quite recognize. The same look suspects give when the handcuffs finally appear. "I've served this airport for 15 years, Rayburn said, louder now, almost pleading. "I've protected thousands of passengers, prevented real threats, and now my career's over because I made one mistake?" Elaine turned, walking back toward her luggage. "I'm not ending your career, officer. I'm holding it to the standard you swore to uphold." She picked up her bag, checking that the security seal remained intact. "The badge doesn't shield you from accountability. It demands it." She addressed the supervisor. "I expect a full internal investigation to commence immediately. This incident has compromised security protocols." The airport manager nodded nervously. "Of course, Director." "We'll begin right away." Elaine turned to the young man who'd been beside her. "Sir, are you all right to continue your journey? Or would you prefer to file a statement?" The student stood straighter, adjusting his backpack. "I'm okay. Thank you, ma'am." Elaine nodded. "If you change your mind, contact this number." She handed him a card. "They'll reach me directly." As the student walked away, his posture had visibly changed. Shoulders back, head higher, no longer trying to make himself invisible. Rayburn, meanwhile, had gone silent, his eyes darting between faces, calculating odds, searching for any sympathetic glance. Elaine watched him closely, like a behavioral analyst studying a subject who had just realized the walls were closing in. "Officer Delaney," she said, "please escort Officer Rayburn to your supervisor's office. This matter is now under formal investigation. The FBI will be in contact within the hour." Delaney nodded stiffly, gently touching Rayburn's elbow. Rayburn didn't resist, but as they turned to leave, he muttered just loud enough for Elaine to hear, "You think you've won, don't you?" Elaine didn't look at him, just whispered, "I think justice is finally entering the conversation." What would you do if the whole room watched you bring someone to justice? Stay strong or show mercy? Let's talk about it. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. Director Richardson, the airport security chief, approached, phone extended cautiously. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary is on the line. He's suggesting we handle this internally. Keep it contained. Elaine stared at the phone without reaching for it. Her expression remained perfectly neutral, but her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Tell the secretary, I don't serve optics. I serve the law." The silence on the other end stretched before the chief nodded. "Yes, Director," he said, returning the phone to his pocket without another word. Someone in the crowd murmured, "She just refused the DHS secretary." Another whispered, "About time." The atmosphere in the terminal shifted, not with applause or cheers, but with a palpable sense of witnessing something rare. Principle over politics. Elaine closed her eyes briefly, just long enough to center herself. When she opened them, her gaze was clear, determined, unwavering. She knew the cost of what she'd just done. Headlines would question her judgment. Allies in Washington would distance themselves. Her confirmation for a second term might be jeopardized. But she also knew the heavier cost of walking away, of becoming part of the system that protected badges over people. And that was a price she would never pay. Elaine removed her secure phone from her jacket pocket, a device reserved for national security communications, and dialed the Civil Rights Division's direct line. "This is Director Richardson. I'm initiating a pattern or practice investigation under Title 42 against the Airport Authority Police. I want a team at Reagan National within the hour." She paused, then added, "And alert the press office. Full transparency protocol." The TSA supervisor straightened. The airport manager paled visibly. Even passengers still lingering went silent, watching history unfold in real time. Rayburn, waiting with Delaney nearby for higher authorities, let out a bitter, disbelieving laugh. "You're actually doing this. You're going to tear down an entire department over one interaction." "Not tear down," Elaine replied, lowering her phone. "Reform." She stood slowly, straightening her jacket. Starting now. Outside, through the terminal windows, several black SUVs with government plates pulled into the restricted zone, their lights flashing silently. 3 FBI agents entered the terminal in dark suits, credentials displayed, their purpose unmistakable. They moved directly toward Director Richardson, nodding respectfully as they approached. Elaine handed the lead agent her phone. "The investigation begins immediately," she said, "starting with Officers Rayburn and Delaney, but not ending there. I want 5 years of complaint records, use of force incidents, and demographic data on all stops and detentions." Rayburn watched in stunned silence as his badge and weapon were collected, not roughly or triumphantly, but with methodical professionalism. His name tag, once a shield, now marked him as the subject of a federal civil rights investigation. The terminal remained hushed long after the officers were escorted out, not with shock or anger, but with the weight of witnessing accountability in action. Elaine turned one last time to the assembled crowd. "This is what justice looks like, when the system works for everyone," she said, "not just those with power." Then she walked toward the exit, FBI detail flanking her, not with fanfare, but with quiet determination. The camera lingered on the empty baggage carousel, still circling steadily despite everything that had unfolded. Beside it, a reminder of how systems continue unless someone chooses to interrupt them. This wasn't about one officer, one airport, one detention. This was about the moment when silence breaks, and someone with power finally says, "Enough." Real justice doesn't announce itself with sirens. It doesn't seek attention. It simply holds the line when that line is crossed. Like Director Richardson, we don't need titles to demand accountability. But when we speak, it matters. Because justice doesn't begin with institutions, it begins with individuals who refuse to look away.